As leaders prepare to sit across the table in Beijing, a persistent and consequential question lingers in the air. Is China genuinely signaling a shift in its posture toward Iran? Or is it instead recalibrating its optics while quietly preserving the economic lifelines that sustain Tehran? This question is not merely academic. It sits at the intersection of global energy security, financial regulation, geopolitical rivalry, and the evolving architecture of sanctions enforcement. The answer will shape not only the trajectory of U.S.-China relations, but also the stability of the Gulf region and the integrity of international economic governance. On the surface, Beijing has taken steps that resemble pressure. China's National Financial Regulatory Administration reportedly issued quiet instructions to major state-owned banks, urging them to pause new yuan-denominated loans to a select group of refiners linked by U.S. authorities to Iranian crude purchases. This directive, delivered discreet, ahead of May 1, included several key elements: a halt on new lending to specific companies, a review of broader exposure to major refining groups, and the maintenance of existing credit lines, at least for the time being. At first glance, such measures suggest alignment, however limited, with international concerns about Iran's oil revenues. They signal that Beijing is not entirely indifferent to Washington's warnings and may be willing to adjust behavior at the margins. Yet the substance of the policy tells a more complex story. The absence of a full clampdown is striking. Existing financing channels remain open. Trade itself has not been curtailed. And perhaps most importantly, China has simultaneously reinforced a contradictory message that foreign sanctions, particularly unilateral ones, do not carry legal authority within China's domestic jurisdiction. China's Ministry of Commerce has explicitly encouraged companies to continue normal trade relations, invoking legal protections designed to shield domestic firms from extra-territorial sanctions. This dual messaging creates a carefully balanced posture. But on one hand, Beijing signals restraint to Washington by tightening formal financial channels. On the other, it reassures domestic firms that trade with Iran can continue under Chinese law. The result is a deliberate ambiguity, a strategy that allows China to appear responsive without fundamentally altering its economic engagement with Iran. This ambiguity is not accidental. It reflects a broader strategic calculation. China seeks to protect its financial institutions from exposure to U.S. sanctions, maintain access to discounted Iranian oil, avoid setting a precedent of compliance with unilateral sanctions, and preserve diplomatic flexibility in a volatile geopolitical environment. Complicating Beijing's balancing act is a renewed wave of U.S. enforcement actions targeting the Iran-China oil trade network. The U.S. Treasury has sanctioned a Chinese refinery, rouse vessels, and a network of intermediaries involved in transporting Iranian crude. These actions are part of a broader effort to disrupt what Washington views as a shadow supply chain sustaining Iran's economy and, by extension, its regional activities. The message to global financial institutions has been unambiguous. Involvement in Iran-linked transactions carries serious risks. U.S. officials have emphasized that secondary sanctions could extend far beyond the Middle East, affecting banks and firms worldwide. This pressure has had real effects. Some shipments have been delayed or rerouted. Brokers have adopted more complex transaction structures, and financial institutions have grown more cautious. Yet the trade has not stopped. Instead, it has adapted. In response to mounting restrictions, market participants have developed a range of alternative mechanisms to sustain flows of Iranian crude. These include increasing use of yuan settlements, routing transactions through third coup, entry intermediaries, relying on shadow fleets of aging or reflagged vessels, and conducting ship-to-ship transfers in international waters to obscure origins. These methods increase costs and risks but allow the system to function. What emerges is not a shutdown, but a transformation from formal, transparent trade to a fragmented, opaque network. From Beijing's perspective, this evolving system may be acceptable, even advantageous. China is the world's largest importer of crude oil, and its domestic production is insufficient to meet demand. Iranian oil, often sold at a discount due to sanctions, represents a valuable component of its energy mix. By maintaining access, albeit through indirect means, China achieves energy security at lower costs, preserves strategic autonomy from U.S. financial pressure, and retains leverage in its broader geopolitical competition with Washington. At the same time, by limiting official financial exposure, it reduces the risk of systemic disruption to its banking sector. This is the essence of China's approach, not outright defiance, not full compliance, but careful calibration. Parallel to its economic strategy, China has positioned itself as a proponent of regional stability. Chinese officials have called for an immediate ceasefire in the Gulf, urged the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, condemned attacks on oil infrastructure, and engaged diplomatically with Iranian leadership. These actions reinforce a narrative of China as a stabilizing force, an actor committed to peace, dialogue, and the smooth functioning of global trade. There is genuine self-interest behind this stance. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical artery for global oil supplies, and any disruption would directly affect China's economy. Yet for Washington, this messaging raises questions. Can China simultaneously advocate stability while maintaining economic ties that generate revenue for Iran? Against this backdrop, the upcoming summit between U.S. and Chinese leadership takes on heightened significance. For the United States, the key objective is clear: reduce the financial flows that support Iran's regional activities. This includes tightening enforcement, increasing transparency, and securing cooperation from major economic partners. For China, the priorities are more complex: avoid escalation with the U.S., protective domestic economic interests, maintain energy supply stability, and preserve policy independence. The risk is that the summit produces a familiar outcome: strong rhetoric but limited substance. Public statements may emphasize cooperation, stability, and shared goals, but without concrete mechanisms such as verifiable enforcement measures or coordinated financial oversight, the underlying dynamics may remain unchanged. Even if both sides agree in principle to greater cooperation, implementation presents formidable challenges. The global oil trade is decentralized, highly adaptable, and deeply interconnected. Efforts to close one pathway often lead to the emergence of another. Intermediaries can shift jurisdictions, financial transactions can be rerouted, and documentation can be altered. Effective enforcement requires sustained monitoring, cross-border coordination, and robust data sharing, all of which are difficult to achieve in an environment of strategic rivalry. Despite these challenges, there is a possible middle ground. The United States and China could pursue a limited, pragmatic partnership focused on transparency in shipping data, oversight of specific payment channels, and targeted action against known intermediaries. Such cooperation would not require full alignment on sanctions policy, but would instead focus on practical measures that reduce risk and enhance accountability. For China, participation could protect its financial system, reduce exposure to secondary sanctions, and reinforce its image as a responsible global actor. For the United States, it would improve enforcement effectiveness, limit revenue flows to destabilizing actors, and avoid broader economic confrontation. The implications of this issue extend far beyond Iran or even the Gulf region. They touch on fundamental questions about the reach of national sanctions, the resilience of global trade networks, and the future of international economic governance. If major powers cannot coordinate on enforcement, the result may be a fragmented system in which rules are unevenly applied and easily circumvented. Conversely, successful cooperation could set a precedent for managing other global challenges, from financial crime to supply chain security. Ultimately, the situation represents a test not only of policy, but of political will. China's current approach reflects a sophisticated balancing act, signaling restraint without conceding autonomy, engaging diplomatically while preserving economic ties, allies and managing risk without sacrificing strategic interests. For the United States, the challenge is to translate pressure into meaningful change without triggering broader instability. As the summit approaches, the world will be watching not just the public statements, but the concrete actions that follow. Will ambiguity be reduced or merely repackaged? Will cooperation be substantive or symbolic? And most importantly, will the outcome contribute to a more stable and transparent global system or perpetuate a cycle of adaptation and evasion? The answers to these questions will shape not only the future of U.S.-China relations, but the broader trajectory of international order in an era defined by complexity, competition, and interdependence.